As Casey said, my name is Jenn Gordon. I serve as Executive Director at Arts Partners, and it's my privilege to work with the amazing people that you're going to hear from today. And this is just, it's such a delight. We're so thrilled to be able to share with you a little bit of the public art scene in Peoria. And I want to preface it that way because you're going to hear about 3 projects today, but there's actually many more than just the 3 that you're going to hear from. If any of you attended the Latinx webinar that was earlier today with Natalia Villanueva Linares, you would have heard of Yaku, and she's also from Peoria, and Yaku's another example of a public art installation-based project program initiative. And so we've just been seeing a lot of critical momentum and mass around the community's interest in this. Today we're going to focus on 3 projects, and before we get too deep, I want to take a moment and introduce our panelists because they're fabulous. So first we have Michelle Nielsen-Ott, if you can wave for us, Michelle. She serves as the Director of Library Services at Methodist College. Serving is a passion for Michelle, serving in the community. In addition to serving on the Arts Partners Board, she also chairs the Sculpture Walk Peoria Committee, which is what she's going to be talking about today. She is the Vice Chair of the Women's Advisory Board and Vice President of Special Events for Women in Leadership of Central Illinois. Michelle is a member of several groups and committees, including Phi Kappa Phi Honor Society, Community Leadership School Advisory Committee, Lions Club, Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America, and Peoria Playhouse's Hopscotch Committee. In support of her children, Michelle is also an active parent volunteer at their school and serves as a hockey team manager. Since 2017, Michelle has been a St. Jude runner. Michelle grew up in Iowa near Davenport and graduated from the University of Northern Iowa, Vanderbilt University Divinity School, and the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee School of Information Studies. She resides in Peoria with her husband and 2 children. Thanks for joining us today, Michelle. Next, we have Erin Bazinski. Hello, Erin. Erin serves as the Director of Galleries, Exhibitions, and Collections at Bradley University, and she's an affiliate faculty member in the Department of Art and Design. Prior to joining Bradley University, Erin served as the Program Director at the Prairie Center of the Arts, an artist residency program and gallery here in Peoria. She received her Master's of Fine Arts from the Rochester Institute of Technology, her Bachelor of Fine Arts from Alfred University, and additionally studied at Lorenzo de' Medici, the Art Institute of Florence, Italy. Bazinski is a member of the class of the 2012 Peoria 40 Leaders Under 40 and an active artist who works in mediums of sculpture, painting, mixed media, and installation. Erin currently serves as a board member with Arts Partners and is chair of the Sky Art Peoria Committee. Welcome, Erin. And then we're going to go on to Doug and Eileen Leunig. I'm going to start with Doug. Doug had an early life experience of winning a prize for a cartoon he drew, and it set him on the path of art. Doug had a good role model in his father, who worked as a successful commercial artist and funded Doug's BFA at the University of Iowa, where Doug studied photography and sculpture. After 30 years as a corporate photographer for a Fortune 100 company, Doug realized that the inspiration of his childhood art background was still with him, and he wanted to make it possible for children today to have art in their lives. He and his wife, Eileen, began by selling their fine art photography and donating their profits to arts organizations. In 2018, they co-founded the Big Picture Initiative to afford a creative opportunity for others. Doug serves as president of Big Picture and enjoys coming up with creative ideas that find fertile ground in the new arts renaissance of Central Illinois. Doug is the artist who created Abraham Blue, which you'll hear about a little bit later. And he's also the person behind the 50-foot portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the Peoria County Courthouse, it's namesake Abraham Blue, that launched Big Picture in 2018. And last but not least, we have Eileen Leunig. Eileen is also a co-founder of the Big Picture Initiative, and she discovered the joy of art early in life and is dedicated to giving everyone the chance to experience and participate in the arts. For the past 10 years, Doug, her husband, have donated profits from the sale of their own arts to arts organizations. In 2018, they founded Big Picture to be able to expand opportunity for art for all. Big Picture is founded on the belief that public art is essential to a vibrant community and that children should have the chance to help create public art. To that end, Eileen and Doug have partnered with Peoria Public Schools and the Peoria Park District in having artists work with students to create murals for schools and for public places. They have also helped create and install new murals in our community, which you're going to hear about a little bit more in a little bit. So first of all, again, I just want to thank all of our panelists for joining us today. We can't wait to get our conversation started. And before we do that, we are going to give everyone just kind of a visual frame of reference for, we are going to give everyone a visual frame of reference for these three programs. We've put together a little movie clip, and if I can get it to play successfully, bear with me, we will share that with you. And Demi or Casey, I might need to ask you to jump in and see if you can help me share this clip, if you're there. Oh, look, they are on it. And thank you so much, Demi, for toggling that screen, and a big thank you to Kenny Delaney for putting together that video for us. Yeah, and at this time, I'd like to invite our panelists to unmute themselves so we can kind of have a more free-flowing conversation. You know, I get so excited about this topic because it really has made just such a collective impact on our community here. And I thought we could start out the conversation today just by going round robin around the table and hearing from you a little overview of what your program involves and why it means so much to you, why you got involved with it. Erin, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So Art Peoria is an Arts Partners Billboard artwork call for entry competition where our local artists submit their images for consideration by a blind jury. And the program, many of you might formerly known it as Art Pop. It was recently rebranded, and the program's in its 6th year, and it is made possible by a partnership with Adams Outdoor Advertising. And so each year 5 artists are selected by the jury to have their work produced at billboard scale, and their works are rotated on display throughout our Peoria community, where they are viewed by millions of local residents and visitors each year. And we have a really wonderful committee that devotes time and energy into making this program possible. And I just want to give a huge thanks to May Gillian Wright, who was the first chair of the Sky Art program, and she was really instrumental in developing and growing the program and really advocating for all the artists who have been involved over the years. And to your question about why this project is important to me, really, for me, this project is important because of its ability to highlight our local talent here in Peoria, and also our ability to directly reach our community members in their own environment.
Awesome, thank you, Erin. Michelle, let's go over to you and hear about Sculpture Walk.
So Sculpture Walk Peoria is a sculpture walk in our downtown area. It started in 2015, so we are in our 6th walk this year. Has varied in the number of sculptures over the years. Currently, we have 9 sculptures on the street. It starts out, it's all on 1 Washington Street. It's about half mile or so that the walk is down and then back. And it kind of is in this area of some really great other downtown art. So I really love that Sculpture Walk Peoria brings in new art along with our lot of permanent pieces that are already downtown, including pieces from Big Picture and also pieces from Sky Art. You can see both of those examples while you're on Sculpture Walk as well. Annually we have a call for entry, and then those entries are then judged. We get community members to do blind judging of pieces, and then we pick the favorites there, and then we work with those artists who have usually an opening day event. This year, of course, we did not, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but usually we coordinate with them to have one day, mass installation day, where all the artists come and install things, and then the next day we kind of celebrate with the community with a ribbon cutting and opening. And then those sculptures stay up for the year until the next sculptures come in. So it's a great revolving exhibition of really large pieces of art, I think, to the downtown that are really striking. And why I got involved, that's a really great question. I somehow, I'm not an artist. I have no visual art background whatsoever. I was just a community member who thought, this is cool, I could get involved with this. And that's just kind of how it went. I met someone who got me involved, and I met Jen, and then it just kind of happened. So it's been a great and wonderful experience to be involved with Sculpture Walk that way.
And Michelle, I love that you said this is something I like and I could get involved with. And the kind of one of the subpoints or purposes of public art is to make it more accessible, so that hopefully anyone can have that reaction to public art and see it and be like, hey, I can enjoy this and I can get involved with it. So I love that reaction. Okay, let's go to Doug and Eileen with Big Picture.
So we saw in the video that we have 4 pillars. We are part of the Public Art Initiative by putting murals on buildings and collaborating with others to do that. We're a grassroots volunteer organization, so we work on projects that we are fortunate to have come to us. We do a street festival and a film festival. Since we've only been a nonprofit for 2 years, we've done that 2 years. This year, of course, it was on hold like everybody else. And we have an arts education program where we hire artists to teach with children. We run some mural classes with Peoria Public Schools in the summer. We've worked with Peoria Park District to get murals in some of the park areas as well.
And then we also collaborate with as many arts organizations and businesses and artists that we can, because one of the things that we have known for ourselves is that we really can't do any of this by ourselves. We depend on the rest of the community. And so one of our big things is collaboration.
So let's do a little bit of a deeper dive there, Doug and Eileen, talking about collaboration. Big Picture didn't happen overnight, and actually it was kind of the culmination of years of smaller projects that helped to establish and build our community's interest in murals and in public art. Can you tell us about some of those steps that helped to pave the way for Big Picture? Yeah,
well, we actually started this whole process of public art in 2014. We had really not had any idea that we're not painters ourselves, we're photographic artists. So we saw a building in downtown Peoria, in kind of the heart of the downtown area, that we felt could utilize some art on their building. So we mocked up a presentation of what it could look like with this art in Photoshop, sent it to the business owner, and he liked it enough. He says, okay, how much is this going to cost me? And we didn't have a clue. We really were doing this just because we thought it was a good idea, and he responded positively. So we found a way to figure it out. We contacted Adams Outdoor Advertising, because they are a great business of producing large art on vinyl. And they gave us the wherewithal to do this, because they are actually gave us at cost. And once we had that, we started envisioning the possibility that, oh, wow, we don't have to just do it on this one building. We could actually set a goal of 48 buildings in central Illinois and have an annual mural festival where everybody comes from all over and has a celebration of the arts with putting up new art every year on the same set of brackets. So that's the way it began for us, and it's been growing ever since.
Yeah, and then about the same time, we a friend of ours who lives in the Netherlands, who is a mural artist, was coming to visit, and he was going to paint a mural in the warehouse district where we were having First Fridays. So we inquired, and we found out we needed a city permit, and we went down to get the permit, and we're told you can't paint a mural in that district because it's a historic district. So we kind of put two and two together and said, well, gee, we now know we can print art on these vinyls, so we could just mount them on buildings with frames. So we went to the city council representative, who was the arts partners liaison with the city, and he worked to change the city ordinance to allow for these mounted murals. That led us to being able to do one of the first murals in town, which was a district of the city that is a residential area where the crime rate was going up, and they knew that we had worked to get this mounted mural ordinance passed, and so they approached us about doing a mural in that district. And they hired a photographer to do portraits of the residents, and that is on display. It's called Faces of the East Bluff.
And that really was a bit of a tipping point, I think, for the community in terms of, I think, understanding a real value to public art. I mean, that piece told the story of people who lived in the East Bluff.
Yes, yeah, it was a point that if you read some of the headlines in the newspaper, you'd start to think, well, I don't want to go to that part of city because it's becoming dangerous. And these, the people who are portrayed are the people who live there, and they're people just like all of us, they everyday people. And the portrait photographer was extremely talented and got, parents with their kids, and the guy who worked at the local grocery store, and it's very powerful.
And it was really the first time that we saw that art can actually change perceptions of a community. Really significant in the sense that these beautiful portraits that were black and white, he did about 70 total, and I think there's probably about that many on this 14 by 48 foot vinyl that's mounted onto a building. It was just life eye-opening. We really saw how it could matter, that this wasn't just pretty pictures on the wall, but it's actually something that could change the way we look at ourselves, change the face of Peoria.
I love it. Nice tie-in. What I love about all of these programs, as attendees are going to hear as we go through this conversation, there's so many touch points between them. and points where you're going to hear how one program inspired the other. And I think, you know, Doug and Eileen, one of those baby steps you were talking about for Big Picture, put a vinyl mural on the Maxim building. Now the Maxim building is located on Washington Street, where the Sculpture Walk happens. So let's move over to you, Michelle, and let's talk a little bit about this revitalization component that happens when, I mean, obviously we kind of already had this piece with the mural on the building, but now we add sculpture to the mix. I understand that you actually used to work in downtown Peoria and would walk along Washington Street. You were very, very familiar with it. And so you kind of saw the transformation over years, pre-Sculpture Walk, pre-murals, to after these programs started. Can you kind of give us a sense of how that impacted your perception of Washington Street?
Yeah, sure. What Doug said about art changing perception of an area and of a community, that is 100% applicable to Sculpture Walk Peoria. So I'm not a native Peorian. I moved here about 11 years ago in 2009. I thought I would stay 1 or 2 years in Peoria and move on. You know, I was just getting started in my career or whatever, but somehow Peoria captured my heart. So I'm here for a decade, longest I've ever lived, you know, as an adult. So, but when I moved here in 2009, Washington Street, and I want to say this, was a hole in the ground. Like it was there was a literal hole in the ground where someday a museum was going to be built. And that's all you know, when I moved here, that's what I was told. I'm an academic librarian by trade. We had an academic library downtown that I would work at. And when I would work there, I'm just like, okay, so this hole is supposed to become something someday. And it did. It became 2 museums, actually, like a visitor center for Caterpillar Museum, and then also our Riverfront Museum as well. And then what's been really great with that was then a couple years after that opened in so the museum opened in 2012, and then in 2015 we were able to start Sculpture Walk Peoria after many years of planning. Our originator, Joe Ritchie, had this idea probably in 2008, and it just took a really long time to kind of get this going, because Washington Street, before the sculptures were there, there was no reason for me to walk it. I don't know if anyone else on the panel would agree. There would be no reason to really walk in that area 5 years ago, down that way and back. But, you know, I saw this Sculpture Walk, and on my lunch break, I would just go walk. I would power walk it. So, you know, I just go all the way down and come back. And I just really loved doing that on my lunch break and seeing things and seeing different pieces. Some pieces, you know, change in the seasons, how you perceive them. There was one piece one year that had like plants growing in it, so you could see how that changed and things like that. And so I just think it's been a huge part of the revitalization of the downtown Peoria. It's a place that and we'll talk about maybe this later, but like I take my family down there, we walk down there. I take people from my work. I'm like, hey, let's go do Sculpture Walk. I've taken groups from other groups that I'm a part of. Let's do this. It's great. And when people see it, they're like, I didn't know that Washington Street could be like this. I didn't know that downtown Peoria could be like this. And I just think that's that changing the perception of downtown, and especially that Washington Street area, has just been in the decade that I've lived here has just been a 180. It's just amazing what the work between all of our groups, that all these art projects have done for that area and that district.
And we should also note that in that time, we've seen new residential developments. So, lofts and apartment buildings. We've seen coffee shops and new restaurants, even new like wedding venues and banquet facilities. And now there's even an axe throwing bar that's along there too. So there's been, really a significant amount of redevelopment that's happened that Sculpture Walk has complemented. So Erin, let's get to you. With Sky Art Peoria, again, kind of a hope with public art is that we're addressing this point of accessibility and making, kind of removing those barriers. And I understand that your husband even felt pretty intimidated when it came to walking into an art gallery and having those types of experiences. So you know a lot about this and what the everyday person faces in terms of barriers to art. Can you kind of walk us through how these programs and Sky Art Peoria in particular help to break down those barriers and make it just a little bit more a normal part of everyday life?
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely, as artists and art supporters and art activists, we all know that try as we may, we can't always lead everyone into art spaces, even if we hold their hand and try to pull them in. And so this is just one of the many reasons why Sky Art and these programs are so vital to our community, because they enable artists and their artwork to reach our community members in a direct, impactful way. And especially in all three of these cases, they turn the street into a gallery. And so it really doesn't matter what preconceived notions someone might have about how to experience art. Sky Art, the artwork in Sky Art always comes to them, and they are really exposed to professional level artwork in their own environment while venturing on their own path. And so people from all walks of life, of all ages, can experience art in their everyday world. And this is really powerful in a traditional arts environment or gallery space. Typically, the viewer is purposefully seeking out the artwork. So you're intentionally going into the environment and you are an active participant in the cultural experience. But programs like Sky Art and the others mentioned, they break the boundaries of a traditional gallery setting. And oftentimes we find that the viewers come to face with, for example, Sky Art, banner-sized art presentations. They come face to face with them unexpectedly. It can be a surprise glimpse while on a bus ride or a few moments at a stoplight. And so the billboard artworks in this program become part of our civic environment.
And they do rotate. So like you said, unexpectedly, sometimes these billboards will rotate a couple times throughout the year. And so you're reintroduced to an art image in a different location in your community, which can also be pretty powerful too.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think there are people who actively search out these works as well and go to our website and look at the map and go specifically to see the works. And so, yeah, it is also that level of, you can still have the experience of actively seeking out the work in these cases as well.
Is there also something that happens to a viewer when you see an image over and over and over again? And again, maybe you're not seeking it out, but we're talking about expanding accessibility. And with Sky Art Peoria, it is the 10 seconds you have at the stoplight that you see that image, but every day on your way to work. And what does that do to help change someone's perception or even their appreciation and entry-level appreciation for the arts?
Right. I think we've heard stories and from our community of people who were so surprised and taken aback to encounter these works. And then it became something that they really looked forward to. And then almost at times they were struck when things changed. It was almost a sad moment for them to have to grapple with the fact that they were losing that piece in that location. So yeah, I think there are some elements of that.
Absolutely. And I'm thinking, I'm just going to interject this really quickly, but you're right, people get attached to public art, and we like to see these programs rotate and change up because it keeps things fresh. But there was a particular piece of sculpture on last year's Sculpture Walk that all of the kids loved. It was these slices of oranges that were stacked up. And I heard multiple stories of youth in our community who were like, where did the orange slices go? And they were so, it took them a while to understand that they were, here for a limited time only. But that shows like people are starting to notice art at a young age. So Doug and Eileen, let's go back to this theme of changing perception. And this is the point in the session where I have to let everyone know we borrowed the tagline for this session, Changing the Face of Peoria, directly from Big Picture. It is their tagline. They're the ones who came up with that. And it's fantastic. But there's a really important story behind it. And Doug, I'm hoping that you can share a little bit of that with us.
Well, I think one of the main things about Peoria, it's got a long history of other people's perceptions about us that isn't us. We were the joke of the vaudevillian stage. Will it play in Peoria because of the people who came through here? What they didn't do well, they got booed off the stage. The ones that succeeded, what they succeeded in Peoria, they went further and succeeded in their routines. So that was the early days, as 100 years ago. But over time, we were the world's largest distillery. So we were known for liquor. And then, of course, during the manufacturing years, Caterpillar being the headquarters here, we were the world's largest headquarters of earth moving equipment. So those things are pretty much what people believe in and thought Peoria was all about. And we were the standard for the norm, if you will. And that isn't really too far removed from what we were back then. But as we know, things change all the time. And we know that there's more things to Peoria than those.
And a consulting group came to Peoria, and part of their task was to evaluate a certain part of the city. And they went on a walking tour that day. And they came back to this group that had been assembled to discuss things with them. And they said, well, our impression of your city is it's very beige. And that, you know, we were kind of aware of that, but that made us realize that for people who come to the city, that part looks very beige. And we recognize that most of the city is not that way. We set out and we knew that there were painted murals in town. We were seeing more of the mounted murals that we were able to happen. And so we put together a mural map, and there were nearly 40 murals in town to prove that we're not all beige. But that also led us to Abraham Blue on the Peoria County Courthouse.
So Abraham Blue was part of the idea that we are now our largest employer in Peoria is the hospital and healthcare system. And if we're going to be the center of America's best healthcare hospital system, which we are striving for and achieving, I will point out, we thought it was important to bring forth in the public view the idea that the arts matter. And one of our first projects was Abraham Blue. In fact, it was our very first project in the downtown area that was 2 years ago in 2018, that was really not just about the historic aspect of Abraham Lincoln as he made his 3-hour speech about the first time he came out about against slavery, and his march to the White House, by the way, but his whole being was, he was severely depressed, or as it's called, melancholia back in his day. Melancholia didn't have the stigma that depression has today, so he was very open about it. He shared with community watched out for him. He's even suicidal at one point, and they took knives out of his rooms and watched out for him. But this community aspect of dealing with depression is something that we can do today as well. So we put up Abraham Blue, and blue being the fact of a symbol for depression, as a symbol that this is something we can strive for, is to help each other overcome our difficulties and overcome the things that obstacles that get in our way. So that's another part of changing perceptions and changing the way we look at things. And that image on the courthouse has become a very important icon for Peoria. In fact, we hear about it almost every day when people appreciate it and drive by and say, I always look at it and I always appreciate the fact that it's there. So it's been an important piece for us.
Can you also, I know you've told me before that in your research to, like, leading up to Big Picture, you would talk with other communities about how they launched public art programs, and you received like a really pivotal piece of advice from, was it Philadelphia?
Yes, yeah, as we started to get more into murals, we reached out to Philadelphia because they have a very expansive mural program, and found out one of the key things for them is that you need to talk to the community. You need to find out what kind of art the community, what portrays the community, what's the personality of the community, what is about this neighborhood that's unique. And so that was vital information for us to get that public voice. And Abraham Lincoln, as Doug said, was in Peoria, made this very historic speech here, and the public, this image resonated with the public. We raised the funds for this within 2 months in order to put this 50-foot mural on the courthouse because it spoke to people.
That's amazing and awesome. Michelle, let's talk about youth impact, and specifically with Sculpture Walk. That program's had a very holistic approach to impacting the community and really working with young people, recognizing that, you know, even for young people, there can be a barrier to engaging with public art if they're not used to that. You know, you have 2 kids of your own, so you've got to see this play out real time. You know, you've got to see them grow up alongside of these sculpture programs that come in and out every year. Can you tell us a little bit about what that has meant for them? And then your perspective, you know, as a mom, watching your kids being able to engage with art like this.
Sure. So my kids have been we just went to the 2020 walk, and that was their 3rd or 4th time that they had been on the walk. We started going to the opening day celebrations and doing the walks, and then when we couldn't, or we would do that, and then we would take the walk later on, kind of on our own. And I'll talk about opening day a little bit, our ribbon cutting ceremony that I alluded to earlier. I always have, like, though I am like working that day, I always have my husband bring the kids down and, you know, do the activities, because we set up lots of interactive activities for people of all ages to really enjoy and interact with the sculpture and that experience. So a lot of times during opening day, that's when the public gets to meet the artists and talk to them and ask them questions, but maybe that doesn't appeal to, you know, a 5-year-old. But we have partnered with lots of area communities, organizations to provide like an on-level sculpture you know, activity for them. So the Peoria Art Guild, they had a table and materials to build sculptures, and we still have those sculptures sit on my bookcase in the other room over here. Still, they build these little sculptures, and they're proud of them, and, you know, can't get rid of those as much as you may want to someday. But you know, they made those, and we partner with the Peoria Playhouse, which is our area children's museum, and they bring out these giant building blocks, and kids of all ages build these giant sculptures out of these foam blocks, lots of different sizes, and playing around in that. Boy Scouts, all different groups have come and really tried to make the event for all ages. And I really love that my kids can participate in that, and that they have access to the arts in such a young age. My kids right now are 7 and 12, and they have access to the arts like I didn't have access to the arts when I was growing up in my hometown. I can't even think of a mural or a sculpture or a billboard or anything big, you know, like really in the public face of my, you know, rural hometown in Iowa. So it's just been really great to have an event like this that my kids can go to. Like this year when we went down there, they knew exactly what to do. You know, they're like, I was like, we're going on Sculpture Walk. And they're like, okay, we know what this is. We know what this, you know, and this year I was just so impressed. Maybe they're a little bit older, but they had really great insights to the art too. And things. And my son was in one of the pictures in the video in that, in the saw, giant saw. And it's this idea of like they interact with the art. You know, before they were just kind of like, okay, mom's taking us on this thing and we're looking at this stuff and I have to walk and it's hot. Sculpture Walk opening day is traditionally the hottest day of May every year for whatever reason. But, you know, we get there and they had great questions to ask me, and we looked at the little, you know, we looked at the brochures and the little signs, and, you know, tried to figure out what the artists were thinking. And it's just been great. And I've had other opportunities with Sculpture Walk to have my kids do art. A couple of years ago, through a grant, we had art kits, and I was able to go to my daughter's classroom, and they all got like that Crayola clay, and they were all, I was showing them pictures of the Sculpture Walk Peoria, and then they were trying to recreate it with their clay. And that was just a great experience to be able to interact in a classroom setting. And also, the college I work at does a summer camp, and I always am the driver for that summer camp. I always bring them downtown. I've done the tour. I've led the tour before as well. Usually we try to get our docent, but I've led the tour as well on the walk, and just trying to get these kids, and they're experiencing something new for the first time. Lots of camps come down and do that. And I think it's just great how many young people are able to see this art, and it's really high quality, really amazing things that I think are interesting to them. And I think that there's just a big impact on youth when they see that art is a viable future for people. Like you can see like, hey, these people were kids once too, and they grew up and became artists, and they are doing these things. You could do that too. And to have that situation, I think, is just really important for a community. And moving forward, I just think Sculpture Walk has really changed a lot about how we feel about Peoria and what the young people experience in Peoria, I think.
Absolutely. And I'm going to interject a question that we had from the audience, and I do promise we will get to everyone's questions eventually, but this is kind of timely. Because I'm thinking, you know, Doug and Eileen, you mentioned when you first started, you made that first pitch to a business owner, and it was like he was hooked, and it was very successful, and you were kind of surprised by it. But particularly for Sculpture Walk and Big Picture, do you have any fundraising tactics or best practices that you would consider? You know, this is really vital if you want to have that community buy-in. You know, again, you said you raised the funds for Abraham Blue in like what, a month or 2 months? That
2 months, yeah. To Michelle's point about the kids, really our most important aspect of Big Picture and what we feel that we're involved in doing is bringing what we like to call the 4 C's of creativity, critical thinking, communication, and collaboration down to the school level, where they're not necessarily being taught that, but when they experience those kinds of things in like our street festival and the film festival, filmmaking, these are all the focuses that people respond to. And I think we've done a really fine job of inspiring the community with the idea that these things are so important and so lacking in our educational system and a lot of in our lives, that Sculpture Walk and Sky Art and Big Picture have brought a new way of looking at everything. And that's going to be moving forward what we will continue doing with our own organization, and collaboration is a huge part of that. It's not just Big Picture and arts partners. It is the fact that we have the largest number of per capita arts organizations in the country, almost. And there are others, but we've got more per capita than Boston and other large cities that are, you know, good supporters of the arts. But we've always had, we've got a symphony that's over 100 years old. Art Guild is also over 100 years old, I believe. These are long-lasting organizations because the Peorians recognize the value of the arts and support it. So I guess that's the best I can do.
And I think as far as the funding for us with some of the building owners who showing them a mock-up of what their building would look like with the art on it is a very powerful thing, because you can talk to them about it and, okay, but you show them a picture and you say, here's the before, here's the after.
You got to see it to believe it.
Yeah, and they, you know, the eight mural gallery that we are revealing on October 10th, that building owner is a very strong proponent of the arts. He approached us and said, I'm, you know, putting a new front on my building and I want to put art on. And it's becoming a little contagious. But once we started showing him, we started out with 6 murals and he said, well, I want another one.
Yeah.
And we added another one and they said, now I want more. So it's, you know, as soon as you mock up something and you show it. So I think that's a key to raising the funds, is this is what it will look like at the end result.
And it sounds like it's always a very personal ask, right? So identifying someone in the community who cares about the arts and who you can go and sit down and have a conversation with, and like you said, cast the vision for what this project looks like.
Yes, yeah, and talk to them about what it is that they want. You know, before we did the first mock-up for the Washington Street Mural Gallery, we talked with them about what they wanted to portray, what they want to contribute to the community. And they really wanted to support local artists, and they wanted a history piece. So
and they
that's
wanted
what we endeavored to do.
a family was important to them. And so on their history piece, they wanted to support Bradley and the OSF nursing. And so we took all of those elements and put them into a 10-foot by 15-foot mural piece of art that is speaking directly to their desire to have this almost like a commission piece. And that's one of the things about the art and artists. They can speak to the specific needs of just about anybody with their own vision as artists, but sharing with others is the most important thing that you can do. And one-on-one contacts is critical.
It's key.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love that, you know, we've been talking about almost this circle. You have funders, you have local artists, you have impacting the youth, reflecting the voice of the community, and all of these big themes that kind of contribute to this overall change. Before we run out of time, I do want to talk about local artists' engagement and why this is also important. With Sky Art Peoria, this program is only open to local artists to have them submit. Now, Erin, you know, you work as a director of galleries, and you work with calls for entry where you get artists from all over the world submitting, and there's an amazing cultural value and you know, wonderful benefits of that. But can you kind of take us through the unique aspect of having a project of this scale that puts public art in front of people, that is exclusively available for local artists in this community?
Absolutely. So we are so lucky here in Peoria to really have a strong base of talented artists living and working in our city. And many of our artists don't always get the exposure and the recognition that they really deserve. And this program affords them an excellent opportunity for recognition and for exposure. And I think it's really important to invest in your own community. And I'm glad you talked about also the importance, Jen, of bringing in artists from outside your community. That is so valuable as well. But also, we need to be supporting our regional artists. And we need to be taking pride in our local talent and actively showing our community and beyond what amazing talent we have here in Peoria. And for the artists, the Sky Art artists, it really is an incredible opportunity for an artist to see their work in a presentation that is, I would say, exceptional. Very few artists will ever get the chance to have their work reproduced at billboard scale. And so for the artists as well, it's an opportunity for them to push their work in new directions, and maybe after the program try things that they may not have considered doing within their work. And it gives the artist the exposure to new audiences. And then it's also a really great economic opportunity for our artists, because I think we've heard a lot of stories from artists that after they participated in the program, they've had website visits tick up, they have seen their sales tick up, the exposure provided to them has really benefited their professional career.
And I'm thinking also of a specific artist from this year, Jackie Music, who, you know, she submitted a piece of embroidery, a photograph of a piece of embroidery that she did, and it was selected, and you probably saw that in the video that we showed earlier, and her comments were she had never really worked much in that medium before. She had worked in many other different artistic mediums, and for her it was just this intense validation that she can work in this artistic discipline too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for a lot of viewers of the project and seeing that piece in particular, they didn't realize that works that are not just straight photography or digital manipulations, you know, works that are mixed media, that push the boundaries of what you would expect to see in a display like this, are also valid options to apply with.
I'm going to make sure we get to the second question that was submitted. And again, if you have questions, and I know we're running out of time, this hour has flown by, but I do want to make sure we get to this one. This is for Big Picture. Do you only work with local artists? I'm a mural artist who has worked for years creating community murals. Just wondering if you work with artists from across the state, and if so, how does one apply to work with your organization?
Cool.
We do. The initial, one of the ways we got started was we mentioned the artist from the Netherlands. He has come back, so we have worked with him. We have been approached by an artist from Des Moines who we are interested in working with him, so we're trying to find the right building. So bigpicturepeoria@gmail.com is the easiest way to reach us. Sorry for the plug, but that's the answer to the question. So please send us some samples of your work. Let us know if you're a painter, and just a little bit of background about yourself. That would be great.
Absolutely. And if anyone has additional, questions following this session, you can also go to the Arts Partners Facebook page and drop us a message, and I will make sure that our panelists get that message, and that we can connect you with them directly as well. I can't believe our time is almost out. This is just crazy, but I do want to, before we leave, if Demi, we have permission to go maybe just a little bit longer, to talk about, I know everyone has been dealing with COVID this year, and honestly, it was really refreshing that up until this point, we haven't talked about that in this session. And that is kind of one of the amazing things about public art. It hovers above even the air we breathe sometimes. There's space for us to experience it, and even in the midst of something like this. But it has, for some projects, maybe not for Art Peoria so much because it's so high up, but for Sculpture Walk and for Big Picture, there's been some adaptations that you've had to make with your programs this year, and even in terms of how they roll out, and the type of supplemental programming that you can do with it. How have you kind of navigated your way through the last 5 months with that? Michelle, let's start with you.
Yeah, so of course, we had already done a lot of our planning for the 2020 Sculpture Walk opening before the pandemic hit. So we had already done our call for entry. We have already selected our artists, the pieces that we were going to have. We already had signed contracts, all that stuff. And then we went into, phase 2, total lockdown, phase 3, and so, but even before that happened, the group that was doing opening day, we were just like, very early on, we were like, we need to shift this somehow. This isn't going to be over in 2 weeks like people are saying, or a month like people are saying. We early on, before even before the stay-at-home order, we were making plans for what could we do alternatively. And we worked very closely with our city government to make sure we were following all state mandates and everything like that, but we were able to get the old sculptures removed kind of one at a time and bring in the new sculptures kind of one at a time. So we weren't able to do our big installation, de-installation thing. And instead of having an opening day, we did a opening day kind of video walking tour with our docents that our head docents. And that has been actually an amazing, amazing addition to Sculpture Walk. And it's something that we think we're going to continue this even after the pandemic. We're going to have this virtual tour that is on the Arts Partners website under Sculpture Walk. And we're continuing to do, we have a People's Choice Award, and we are continuing to do our People's Choice Award that way. And we've also promoted Sculpture Walk as a socially distant art experience. We're not enclosed in a gallery. You can make the walk outside and still stay safe with your family or with close friends or whatever, and experience the art in a really great way. And we're trying to make plans for 2021 and what that will look like. We're in the process of that, and we'll see what happens as we come closer, because we are 100%, Sculpture Walk is 100% donations from individuals and corporations. That's how it's funded. So we're looking at how we can fundraise in this environment, how we can move forward. But we've learned some really great things, and we're going to keep some of these really great things too. So
awesome. Yeah.
The future's good.
Everyone, I dropped in the chat box, there's a link to the Sculpture Walk videos if you want to check those out. Big Picture, you typically have this big street festival that kind of kicks off many new mural public art projects that are going on. This year you couldn't do that. So how did that go?
So we couldn't hold the street festival. So one of the, there's a lot of key aspects, or the film festival. Yeah, there are a lot of key aspects of the street festival, but for us, one of the important parts is the kids zone, where kids have a chance to come and see professional artists at work, but also to participate in making art. And while we couldn't replicate that experience exactly, we put together 1,000 imagination starter kits with the grades 1 through 5 were process-based art materials, so things like craft sticks and pipe cleaners, and then we included an ideas starter booklet, and we distributed those 1,000 kits through mainly to inner city. We were going to team up with the school program where they were giving out food for families this summer, but we found another way to reach some of the students, so we had various volunteers take those art kits out to kids, and in some cases the volunteers sat and worked with the kids and were able to send us photos, which were very heartwarming just to see the fun that the kids had with those things. Earlier in the year, we distributed masks and fabric paint so the kids could paint their own masks, and so those were fun to see as well. And then the other program we did, I'll let you talk about.
Okay, well, Giving Voice is going to be a digital magazine that we are releasing October 1. So tomorrow is the first publication of this. We have 6 or 7 now. 7 students. Some of them are college students, some of them are high school students, but we are focusing first on students because that's the audience of arts education that we are looking to encourage. But we are looking for not just articles written by these students, we're looking for photo essays, we're looking for illustrations and graphic design, we're looking for anything that we can put into this magazine, which will also include links like to filmmaking and videos. Eventually, the first issue won't have too much of that. It does have a photo essay, but the idea is that we want to have kids engaged in real world experiences. We got a grant from the Gilmore Foundation that allows us to pay these students $25 for $50 for, it's actually, the articles are 500-word articles, and we're paying just under what Peoria Magazine pays for professional, well, half of what Peoria Magazine pays, but we're paying them is the main thing. We think too often artists are not given the credit where credit is due. They're given exposure only. And in the case of the true artist, needs to be paid for their talent. So that's one of the things that Big Picture really stands behind. No matter what, we always try to make sure that they get due payment for their talent.
So
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. The first issue, we asked the students to contribute an article on what our community needs most. And so you'll have to wait till tomorrow to see what they say.
Yeah, so everyone should check that out. But also what I love about this, Doug and Eileen, is you've taken this opportunity with some of the limitations that COVID has kind of forced us into to practice what you preach. And as you said before, knowing those community stories and knowing the voice of the community, that's a vital component of any type of public art project.
And another important part that I want to get into real quick is the fact that these kids will ultimately be working, like with May Wright of Peoria Magazine, for their written articles. She is acting as a real editor, and she's giving them real business world advice onto how they should deal with their writing skills. So it's not just having a format that they get to express themselves in. It's actually a learning experience throughout. And we plan to do that with filmmaking as well. We're talking with 2 filmmakers right now that are going to be working with us to put on an online video making class that will also have a component of occasionally getting out with projects in the community so they can have socially distanced experiences, but also hands-on. And that's one of the things that you can't get when you go to a master class to learn these things. These are the important elements that we can do as a community and through collaboration with other artists.
It all feeds each other. That's wonderful. Encarnacion dropped a little message I want to make sure I share with everyone who's on the call. Illinois Arts Council Agency announces fiscal year 21 Artist Fellowship and Literature Award Program applications. The guidelines are now available at arts.illinois.gov and $15,000 awards. So if you're an artist on this call, make sure you check that out, or an organization. Lots of tiebacks there. I think kind of to finish off this session, and I warned you in advance we were going to run out of time, and I do thank everyone who stayed with us during this. But Erin, I'd like to go back to you and ask you to give us kind of your perception of how we're going to need to use public art and the lessons we've learned from this time to kind of reimagine the future when we look at the arts landscape in our communities.
Yeah, so it's been really wonderful, even in light of the pandemic and everything going on. It's been really wonderful to watch so many arts organizations and artists respond to the pandemic, to respond to the situation, and really find creative ways to still host safe events, either within their venue or outdoors. And I really think it's my opinion that we're looking at a future where organizations and artists are still going to be grappling with how they continue to provide exceptional, safe artistic experiences. And I think the public art programs that we've talked about today, they are truly safe live art experiences, and we're really lucky to have them already in place. And I think they're going to be a great model for not only what we continue to do in Peoria, but for other cities across the country. And it'll be interesting to see what happens, and the power of art within a time like this, and using our civic landscape. There's so much unlimited potential there to help us through these times, and not only the pandemic, but really for social change during these times as well, to fight systematic racism and justice. There's so much going on right now that there's so much power in public art to help us all.
And with that, I would like to thank our panelists again, Michelle Nielsenot, Erin Basinski, and Doug and Eileen Loinig. I would like to thank Casey Smith, as well as Demi, who's been working the technology behind the scenes, everyone at Arts Alliance Illinois, and of course at the Illinois Arts Council. Thank you for everyone who's joined us for this session. And if you have any, again, additional questions, feel free to message us directly at Arts Partners on Facebook, and we'll be sure to put you in touch. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jen.
Thanks.